Former Islanders captain John Tavares has been stripped of his captaincy in Toronto, but that doesn't mean there's a reunion happening anytime soon. We'll discuss what it means and why a reunion is unlikely. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR vs NYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. During the offseason, that means hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, the draft. If it's happening to the New York Islanders, we'll discuss it here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. And it's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. The news coming out of Toronto, and it'll be official and announced today, Wednesday. John Tavares, former captain of the New York Islanders, going to be stripped of his captaincy in Toronto. Austin Matthews going to be the new captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And a lot of speculation out there about whether or not that means that the Leafs will now try to trade John Tavares. And even some more speculation on a number of different Islanders-related websites as to whether or not it would make sense for the Islanders to try to acquire or reacquire John Tavares. Let's start with the beginning. According to the reports, Tavares, stripped of his captaincy, he was involved in the discussions. He supported the change. And again, the captaincy going to Austin Matthews. I'm going to explain why it makes sense from John Tavares' perspective for him to be supportive. JT has 1 year left on his current contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That blockbuster deal that he signed with Toronto back in 2018. It's a 7-year deal. This is year 7. The annual cap hit for Tavares, $11 million. And he has been the captain of the Maple Leafs for much of his tenure. And here's the deal. Guess what? During his entire tenure as captain, the Maple Leafs, a team that is loaded with talented offensive players like Austin Matthews, like William Nylander, like John Tavares. This team has advanced past the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs exactly once in the 6 years that John Tavares has been a member of the Maple Leafs. And do I blame John Tavares alone for that? Absolutely not. There are a lot of reasons why the Maple Leafs never made it past the first round except for 1 year in the last 6. And for Islander fans, let's face this, it has been refreshing, kind of a little bit of smug satisfaction for many Islander fans that the Islanders in the last 6 years since Tavares posted that picture on social media of him as a young child in his Maple Leafs pajamas sleeping, the Islanders have had more playoff success than the Maple Leafs by a wide margin, I might add. Islanders made those 2 trips to the conference final, also won a playoff round in 2019, which was Lou Lamoriello's first year as GM. So, the Islanders basically are 2 trips to the conference final or 4 series wins ahead of the Maple Leafs in, head-to-head playoff series wins in the last 6 seasons. But here's the thing you got to remember. John Tavares, in addition to having his $11 million cap hit, he also has a situation where it has been his lifelong dream to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That is the team, as that infamous photo showed, that is the team he grew up rooting for. That is, his hometown team. That is, when he was a kid playing hockey on ponds or in youth leagues or whatever, his fantasy was it's game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals and Tavares comes down the ice for the Maple Leafs. He shoots, he scores, the Leafs win the cup. Okay, typical of a kid growing up in Ontario. Not going to begrudge John Tavares that. But to our knowledge, John Tavares has made no request to be traded off the Toronto Maple Leafs. John Tavares has, in addition, a full no movement clause in his contract. So there is no team that the Maple Leafs can trade him to without his approval. And while this may very well be JT's last year wearing the leaf on his sweater there, I think he wants to give it one more go in Toronto to keep that dream alive and move on to win that elusive Stanley Cup that has not been won by the Maple Leafs since Lyndon Johnson was president and the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper in 1967. Okay. Tavares, last year, he struggled. He did not have a particularly good season last year with the Leafs. And over the course of his 6 years in Toronto, his best year by far was his first season where he had 88 points in 82 games, 47 goals. That is his career high. He only had one 30-plus goal season after that. That was in 2022-2023. 80 games, 80 points. This past year, 29 goals, 65 points in 80 games. And the amazing thing is his shooting percentage, it did go down, but he took 2 more shots than he did the previous year. And his ice time even went up. But Tavares just offensively has not been as productive. He is also, by the way, 33. He'll turn 34 in September. This is most likely the start of the decline of John Tavares. His prime is ending, and, he is most likely going to start falling down from, I don't think he was ever an elite player, like one of the best 2 or 3 players at his position in the league, but I think he was sort of the tier below that, always kind of very good rather than elite. I mean, he's only been on one postseason All-Star team, and that was with the Islanders back in 2014, 2015. never won an award for the Islanders, never won, or for the Leafs, never won the Calder, never won the Conn Smythe, never won the Hart or the Rocket Richard. I mean, that just wasn't his game. He just never reached that level. At the end of the day, John Tavares, if I'm the Maple Leafs and I'm running that team, I don't trade John Tavares. I don't think JT is the kind of guy who's going to be a problem in the locker room now that he's no longer the captain, although a lot of players would be that kind of a guy. But to me, you hold on to him if I'm running the Maple Leafs, and I say, let's see where we're at. And the closer you get to the trade deadline, you can make a move. You could, if your team is struggling or out of it, or you're not happy with the chemistry, trade them. Trade them at or near the deadline rather than losing him for nothing. I know this sounds familiar, Islander fans, but these are things you can do. And if it's working and the Leafs are playing really well and Tavares is playing well, you either can sign him to a new extension or hold on to him, double down, and add a couple of players to make that cup run. So I don't think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are eagerly shopping John Tavares right now. And from covering the Islanders all these years, I know John Tavares, he's not a cancer in the clubhouse. He may not be, the greatest captain in franchise history, but he's a team guy. And I don't think he's going to cause the Leafs problems now that they've stripped him of the C. But if the Leafs are looking to trade John Tavares, could the Islanders acquire him? We'll talk about why and why not coming up. We'll also discuss what the Islanders' new identity is going to be now that the identity line is most likely gone. And for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a goalie who was with the team in 2009, 2010, and also played for the other two New York State teams, the Rangers and the Buffalo Sabres. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All this and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and you get their lowest price guarantee. So Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And my favorite feature on Game Time is the view from your seat. You go on the app and you can see a panoramic view from your seat before you purchase the tickets, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And oh, yeah, by the way, I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition, so definitely please check it out. Look, there are a lot of obstacles. I've read a couple of articles where people are saying, yeah, it would be a win-win for the Maple Leafs and the Islanders if John Tavares was traded back to Long Island. Yes, but is kind of my take on this. Do the Islanders need another top six forward, another guy who could create offense and put the puck in the net? Absolutely. despite the bad taste that was left in a lot of fans' mouths, do I think fans would eventually welcome JT back? Some would hesitate. Some may never forgive him. Some would. But I'll tell you this, and I say this with a certain amount of confidence. If John Tavares would return to Long Island and he would score 35 goals and get you 80 points, or just have a great season, fans would warm back up to him pretty quickly, I think. Does he feel a need? Yes. Is he the type of guy that Lou Lamoriello would add to the roster? A guy who's almost 34, whose best years are maybe behind him? Is he the kind of guy that Lou would trade for and sign him to a 5 or 6 year extension with a no trade clause? Yeah, he might very well be just like that kind of a guy. But here's the problem. You have this $11 million cap hit, plus, as I mentioned, a no movement clause. Even if Toronto retained 50% salary, or if you got a combination of the Maple Leafs and a third team involved in the deal, even if the cap hit for the Islanders went down to $5.5 million, you would still, from an Islanders perspective, clear up $5.5 million. You would still need to trade a J.G. Pageau or a Ryan Pollock or an Adam Pelech or a Kyle Palmieri in order to make room under the cap for John Tavares. Pelech and Pollock have no movement clauses just like Tavares. They would have veto power over any deal. I just don't see Lou Lamoriello making that deal. I mean, you could free up $5.5 million of cap space by trading J.G. Pageau and sending Oliver Wahlstrom in as part of the deal, or maybe you put Oliver Wahlstrom on waivers if you can't get anyone else to take him, and voila, you go with a 22-man roster rather than a 23, and you somehow fit JT under the cap. But I just don't see it. First of all, Tavares is a center. Can he play wing? Sure. Is he better at wing? No. If you trade J.G. Pageau, is John Tavares going to be your third line center? And then who is he playing with? Because remember, all of his production in Toronto over the last 6 years, and it's not, like I said, he's been good, but not Hall of Fame good. All of those years, all of that production was playing on a line with and playing on a team with elite offensive talent. So if you go back, to his Islander days where he's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, 65 to 75 points in an 82-game season, once or twice better, once or twice worse, but for the most part, a little less than a point a game, maybe as an Islander, about a point a game. Now at the age of 34, which is how old he'd be, at the end of September, late September, you are not getting that same guy anymore. Last year, 65 points in 80 games playing with elite line mates. So if he's the third line guy, he's going to be playing with who exactly? With Pierre Engvall on one wing, and maybe Anders Lee on the other. If you put him in the second line and move Brock Nelson down, I mean, maybe he plays with Siplakov on the third line and Lee, or Siplakov and Engvall. But it's not the same as playing with William Nylander or Austin Matthews or, any of the guys he's been playing with. So I don't think you get the ultimate amount of production from John Tavares if he joins the Islanders and either is in his second or third line role. I mean, you could theoretically put him on the second line, move Brock Nelson to wing, and you can go like Tavares, Nelson, Palmieri. That would be a very solid second line. And then, see Plakov would be your third line guy, probably with Cizikas and Lee, or there are possibilities. But I just think there's too much baggage there. The cap is an obstacle. The players themselves that we're talking about, whether it's Pajot, whether it's, Pelech, Polak, Palmieri, Tavares, all of them have no trade clauses or no movement clauses or partial no trade clauses. It becomes, there's a lot of obstacles involved. And then, how would Islander fans react to all of this? I think it would be very mixed. I don't think there'd be a lot of patience with Tavares. Again, he'd have to prove himself all over again. And I just think it is very unlikely to happen. Are there reasons to do it? Yeah. But I think the reasons not to do it and outweigh them. And here's the biggest reason not to do it. The Islanders are not one player away from being a cup contender right now. Even if that, okay, maybe if Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid came over and you gave them up for, Anders Lee and a first-round pick, okay, maybe then we're talking about the Islanders coming closer to being considered cup contenders, but you're not getting those guys, okay? You're not getting Austin Matthews. You're not getting Leon Draisaitl, and you're not getting Connor McDavid. At the end of the day, signing a 34-year-old forward who has 1 year left on his contract, who then you'd have to extend, and knowing Lou, he'd want to extend him before the trade gets approved. The Islanders need to get younger, faster, and more skilled. Tavares would certainly make them more skilled, but would not, in the long run, solve this team's problems and wouldn't be worth all those obstacles to try to overcome them in order to make that deal. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. Now that the identity line is most likely broken up, what is the Islanders' identity? We're going to talk about that. We'll also have our Islanders' birthday of the day. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On NHL, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the description, so you don't need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So under Barry Trotz, and to a lesser extent under Lane Lambert, we know the Islanders were that team that everyone hated to play against. They didn't score a lot of goals, but they didn't give up a lot of goals. They forechecked relentlessly. They played really playoff-style defensive hockey all year long. They forechecked aggressively. They hit you if you beat them. And remember, the Islanders never made the playoffs by a large margin, even in the best days of the Barry Trotz era. Those two runs that they made to the conference final, they still barely made the playoffs. In fact, that first year in 2020, the COVID year, the Islanders would have missed the playoffs if they didn't expand the playoff field to account for COVID and the shortening of the season. Not to delegitimize the long playoff run. It was legit. They earned it. But again, the Islanders were never an elite team in the standings, but they were capable of putting together these runs and playing some great hockey that allowed them to compete with any team, any night, and beat them. So that identity, it sort of loosened up under Lane Lambert, and now it's different. No more Josh Bailey. He's no longer with the team. Clearly, it looks like Martin and Clutterbuck not coming back, although, again, we don't know for sure. Lou Lamoriello did say he's not closing the door entirely, but it's unlikely they start the season with the team. Now what? What is the Islanders' identity? We know Patrick Roy wants to be faster, play more of a forecheck, have a different system defensively to limit time and space, and to better organize the team's exit from the zone, defensive zone, all things this Islanders team needs badly to accomplish. And we did see some progress toward that, especially late in the season under Roy. But the Islanders right now, they're not a run and gun offensive team like maybe the Leafs were or the Oilers were a few years ago. Although now both of those teams have certainly improved on defense. Maybe like the Canucks were under Bruce Boudreau. They are not a shut them down, beat them 1-0 team like they were under Barry Trotz necessarily. The fourth line may not be the identity line anymore, not just because the players are different, but because the fourth line doesn't usually set the identity of an NHL team. I think the first 2 or 3 months of this season, the 2024 part of this 2024-2025 season, is when the Islanders are going to establish what their new identity is. And we'll see how this team, what Patrick Roy asks them to do and how they respond to it and what they do well enough to make it their identity. And it'll be interesting to keep an eye on what that's going to be. I think the problem is, even though a guy like Anthony Duclair makes the Islanders faster, this is still not a roster that is considered fast top to bottom by NHL standards. They're not a speed team. They're not a run and gun team. They're not a shut them down team. It'll be interesting to see what identity this team takes on. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and Thursday will be the 47th birthday of former Islanders goalie Martin Biron, the native of Lac Saint Charles, Quebec, drafted first round by the Buffalo Sabres in 1995, made his NHL debut in 98-99 with Buffalo, later played for Philadelphia, and then joined the Islanders for the 2009-2010 season. 29 games with the Isles, a .327 goals against average and .896 save percentage, and then joined the Rangers the following year and finished his NHL career with 4 seasons on Broadway, although really only played significant games in 2 of them. Martin Biron, 508 career NHL games, a .261 goals against average, and a .910 save percentage. Put up some really respectable numbers. One of his best games, if not his best game as an Islander, October 31st, 2009, Halloween night at the Old Barn, the Nassau Coliseum. One of his former teams, the Buffalo Sabres, coming to town, and the Islanders skate away in a wide-open game with a 5-0 victory. The Islanders outshot 38-30 in this game, but 38 saves by Marty Biron, and the Islanders get the shutout. On the offensive side, a hat trick for second-generation Islander Jeff Tambellini, but the great goaltending by Biron, outdueling Ryan Miller and Patrick Lalime, both who played for Buffalo, that gave the Islanders the big win. Marty Biron, good broadcaster and a really nice guy. Great to talk hockey whenever I did get a chance to do that with Marty Biron. He is our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're back on Friday with a new show. We will have all the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. Again, pretty soon we're going to start going over each Islanders draft pick. So make sure you join us for that throughout this busy off season. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.